So these last 24 hours, we've seen an awful lot of chaos coming out of the White House, maybe the most we've ever seen. And frankly, it's probably going to get worse, which is crazy. We also have some reporting what's going on in China in response to the chaos in the White House. And also we have reports of what's going on with Elon Musk. I want to tie all these things together and let's just jump right in. So first, China leaders to meet on stimulus after Trump's tariff shock. So basically, Trump put 125% tariff on China. And now China has to decide, okay, what's our response going to be? I think chances are they're probably going to raise tariffs in the USA, but there's other things they can do as well. It is very different culturally happening in China than in USA. You also have this: China musters national team to fight on front line in trade war, right? So they're trying to pull all of their best people, get them all in the same room, and figure out how can we, stand up to the Trump tariffs. In contrast, over at the Trump side or the White House side in the U.S., it says here the 18 hours that changed Trump's mind on trade and from be cool to getting yippee inside Trump's reversal on tariffs. It's really different, right? In China, they're like assembling their, essentially Avengers of economic advisors together, the national team, right? We're going to the Olympics against the USA. And then in the USA, you got the president and his band of, cronies talking about being cool and getting yippee. it's laughable and embarrassing at the same time, and it's not unexpected. But I just wanted to point out like the kind of the teams that are going against each other. That's a good way to describe it. It's culturally really really different. In the Trump camp, you got a bunch of self-serving people. In the China camp, you have a lot of people that are looking to save face, right? It's a different thing culturally, and that's something they'll hear a lot. If for those of you who have ever worked in China, or it's all about guanxi, make sure you all maintain the right relationships. In the White House, let me just read a description. You'll kind of get a sense of what we're talking about here. It's a TV show. It says here, late Tuesday night after Sean Hannity's 9 p.m. show ended on Fox News, this is literally a TV show, Trump had an extensive, roughly hour-long phone call with a group of Republican senators who had appeared on the episode, right? They're all on TV together. According to three people with knowledge of the conversation, some of the senators had expressed concern about the tariffs. That evening, Trump was watching bond markets where people were getting a little queasy. And then it lists the names of the various senators. And it was like on Fox. If you want to watch the thing, you can. But it was like, Senator Kennedy was there, Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator John Toom, Tim Scott, Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, and also Senator Mullen of Oklahoma. So a lot of different senators. And it wasn't just senators. There's like all these people trying to talk to Trump, be it Besant, be it Lutnick, whoever, right? And there's another description. Let me just read it for you. It says, again, this is from the White House. It was a shocking turnabout coming after days of Trump's aides arguing that he was seeking to remake the global economy. But Tuesday evening to Wednesday afternoon, Trump and his trade advisors spoke to several Republican lawmakers and top foreign leaders who raised concerns about faltering global markets and the growing concerns of the worldwide recession, urging him to do something. I mean, it's laughable and crazy at the same time. And when you read this stuff, they're also like get the sense of like everyone's trying to convince Trump to back down and not do anything crazy. That's really the difference here that I'm seeing. So in China, they're just like, okay, how can we save face, stand up to the USA, and probably not, ruin relationships entirely? I think that's sort of the end game there, because and they could see theoretically just we're just going to cut off USA forever, screw that. But if you're China and any country, not just China, any country, because Switzerland was mentioned in this article as well. That in 4 years you're going to get someone else, right? So Trump will be gone. And yes, I am confident that. I know sometimes people say, oh, no, Chris, Trump's going to be around for a third term. I don't see it happening in this scenario, that he's just burning too many bridges at this point. But he is the president of the United States. And that's why I wanted to contrast the differences between what's going on in the U.S. and China. It's interesting when you read this stuff. Here's more. It says, behind the scenes, senior members of Mr. Trump's team had feared a financial panic that could spiral out of control and potentially devastate the economy. I know we're talking about like really serious stuff, and I know I chuckle this stuff because it's like you realize like how chaotic these things are. Also says here, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and others on the president's team, including Vice President J.D. Vance, had been pushing for a more structured approach to the trade conflict that would focus on isolating China, meaning that we don't have a plan, we don't have any structure, we're just like going on the whims of a dude. That's kind of what this goes on about. Now, listen to the contrast of what's going on in China when you put these two together. Is in China, it's how different it is. China's top leaders are poised to meet Thursday to discuss additional economic stimulus after U.S. President Donald Trump ratcheted up tariffs, according to people familiar with the matter. The ad hoc meeting is set to focus on support measures for housing, consumer spending, and technological innovation, said people asking not to be identified because obviously a private matter. Other government bodies, including financial regulators, are also convening to discuss steps to boost the economy and stabilize the markets, people said. The schedule could still change. So if you understand how China operates, and I used to work there, the government is always concerned about stability and people panicking. Like they're just trying to hold people together because people do protest in China. I mean, and they do, and they're always worried about the wealthy people in China just taking all their money out of China and throwing it in USA or doing whatever money laundering or whatever wealthy people could be in the government, doing things for their own self-benefit. They're worried about corruption. That's essentially a major problem in China, disappearing money, corruption, this kind of stuff. And so they're just trying to hold it together. It's not so different than what's going on in USA, but I just want you to see the contrast where in USA, it's more like you got all of these, like, let's to say, people who want to be on TV and are self-serving, and it's a game show. In China, a lot of these times, like, you won't necessarily know who each individual department head is particularly, because like oftentimes you'll see just like the face of it, right? And it's always a bunch of old dudes, and they march them out, etc. But then the behind closed door stuff, it's more closed than when you hear about the USA. So public disagreement, stuff like that isn't so common in China. Like, even if there were a story to break out like that, they would be doing it to shame a particular politician. It's really different over there. The government always is trying to give the sense of solidarity. And in this particular issue, hey, if you're summoning a national team or something like that, it must be quite serious, and it should be serious, of course. These are serious times. I just want you guys to get the contrast between the two styles of leadership, and I also want to just make it evident that I think both sides are flawed in different ways. Okay, China is not a democracy, and the biggest problem in China is lack of free speech. That's something I've told you guys about before. And when I worked there, it was really evident. Also says here, China said it had plenty of room, including easing borrowing costs, right? So make it easy to get money, to keep the economy going if there were a slowdown because of the China and U.S. trade war. You could do reserve requirements for lenders, so banks don't have to hold so much money. Defend its economy, the communist flagship newspaper Daily said on the front page, a commentary earlier this week, right? And then they're talking about measured depreciation of the yuan. So that's been something that they've been talking about. So basically, if China devalues their currency, it makes goods in China cheaper for Americans to buy. So there's that. So on top of that, in USA, this is something that's like right out in the open. So China's a lot less transparent. The US is more transparent. There's still things that we don't know exactly what's going on with the Trump people, but we do know more there than what we would in China. For example, Elon Musk, is buying a lot of influence in the White House. From what I can gather, though, he wasn't mentioned in any of the articles, and I read multiple ones of what's happened in the White House. Yes, Musk is, tweeting about Doge and all the Doge stuff and whatever nonsense that he does in video game stuff on Twitter. But I don't see Musk being influential right now in terms of the what's going on with the negotiations of China. I don't think Musk is setting the tariff rates and stuff like that. Musk does complain though about Navarro, and he complains about tariffs as a whole. But I wanted to point this out, is that Musk's company is frankly the wheels are falling off, and this is a good example of sort of how U.S. is operating at the moment. The Cybertruck, the headline is Tesla reportedly stops accepting Cybertruck's trade-ins as unsold trucks pile up. So they won't even take their own vehicles back to the trade-in, which is kind of crazy. And then there's part of it too as well. If depending on the state you're in, consult your lemon laws, because these things are basically a piece of crap. I wouldn't touch these things. I say you can buy them if you want, but I wouldn't get one. On top of that, Uh, where China, they're trying to assemble all these things for all of the policy tools that they have to withstand the U.S. tariffs. In the USA, they're all trying to dismantle the government and figure out ways that they can enrich themselves. And for example, here this was a really interesting one. Musk Doge fired self-drive car safety expert at agency that regulates Tesla. So basically, if you know this story, Musk has been promising robot driving for years, right? The car can drive itself safely, etc. Even though it doesn't have sensors, which all the other manufacturers do. Musk just always says we just have a really really awesome AI. It's smoke and mirrors. It's a lie basically. And so what do you do to protect your technology? You fire the people who are going to regulate said technology. This is just massive open corruption. You can see it is clear as day. And this is sort of where the U.S. is going. And it's you could argue the U.S. is trying to go closer to the China model, which I mentioned, but well, it's going to play out differently because culture differently. But it's gonna lack the transparency, which we don't want. Like remember, Trump and Musk, they hate reporters, so they don't want anyone to tell you like how competent and incompetent they are, which is what we're hearing reports on saying. Or you don't want them to hear like they're making decisions on a whim. There's not really experts being consulted whatsoever. There's no plan. There's no structure. It really is crazy as we're seeing on the surface. This one is already because when you understand a market, there's a lot of players or participants, you can say the official word, in markets, and people are already slowing and canceling orders, be it Amazon, whatever, because in this environment, you just don't know if Trump will just change his mind the next day. So theoretically, there's a 90-day pause on countries around the world, but there was still the trade war with U.S. and China. So again, we're waiting to hear China's response. You also got this, which is really an interesting thing. The Republicans, I told you guys before in the last video, they were going to have a vote on the budget, but they couldn't get enough votes to pass because a lot of people are like looking at the math of the whole Trump administration, and it doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. There's too much deficit spending. It's freaking out the bond market. Plus, you got tariffs, which you don't know what they're going to be from day to day basis. I completely understand why you wouldn't want to pass a budget at this point, because go back to the drawing board, right? And then you're going to having a fight with how many tax cuts do we want to do, and can we actually afford it? The whole thing is chaotic. And then you have this other wrinkle in the story as well. I don't know what to make of this one. China's going to deny this story 100%. They're going to deny it, but there could be some coordination, but who knows? We really don't know. So this is the headline: Ukraine war briefing. Zelensky says U.S. Quote, very surprised after Chinese fighters captured on the front line. So I guess there was like 150 Chinese nationals fighting for Russia. So what? Already we know that there were North Koreans that I think they were captured also. That was like, I don't know, like a month or so ago. I remember reading some description of that. The war effort for Russia, if you're using foreign fighters to this degree, is probably not going well for them. And it's kind of crazy that, the Trump people, well, it's Trump's point of view, they want to help Russia, of course. Same with Musk, but it's crazy that we're withdrawing support when it's clear that Russia is not as strong as they say they are. So that's another wrinkle. And is China officially working with Russia in the war effort, or are these just mercenaries that happen to be Chinese nationals working in the war effort? Who knows? That part I don't know. I read through everything. Of course, China is going to deny everything, and so that is a wrinkle in this story as well. There's been rumors. Is China going to making a play, right, a military play or whatever for Taiwan the next couple of years? That certainly could be on the table with Trump in office, right? That could be part of the negotiations for all we know. There's a lot of uncertainty going ahead, and I think the thing I want you to get from this, and I know we went through a lot, was just to understand that the stuff that often you're going to see, be it your mainstream outlets, be it your Fox or CNN or whatever, they're not going to mention this kind of stuff. And I think unfortunately that there's a couple major problems with U.S. media. One is they're always way too U.S. focused. They act like there's no other country in the world. I always had a problem with that. I had a problem with that when I was a kid. That's just how America is. I get it. I really get it. And I just always want to remind you there are other people out there in the world. There's other countries out there, and there's other ways of thinking and doing business. So just because USA is strong and powerful now does not ensure that forever. And Trump is effectively is destroying the U.S. leadership position, cutting USAID and other, help and support to other countries around the world. China is actually stepping in and fulfilling that. The problem with China, though, is it's authoritarian, right? So the big issue is human rights abuse, lack of free speech, and they got a lot of problems over there in China. It's different than the problems in USA, but both countries have problems, and we're also faced with economic slowdowns. And I think from both point of views of each country, you just want stability among your population, and you don't want your population out, protesting like nuts. The biggest difference, though, with say USA is normally in any normal terms, and we're not in normal times right now, but in any normal circumstances, I'd be like, I'm all about supporting the president. I'm all about, supporting USA. But with a situation like Trump, he's just a loose cannon. And I feel like this is a similar situation with Biden. And I said it the same time when Biden was having these issues, is like, both Trump and Biden are just too old, and I wish they would just step down. I know it's not going to happen with Trump; he's not going to step down, but it's the people around him that need to figure out, get the guy out. And this is it's a real deep problem in our U.S. system at the moment, that we're letting these old people run the show, and it's a real problem. So I just wanted to share my thoughts on this stuff, and I have a lot of things I want to say every single day. And when China gives an update on what's going on, I'll let you know. So I want to hear your thoughts on this stuff as well. And I'll catch you on the next video.